Confronted by the destruction that he had caused, there amongst the corpses and broken shields, Ashoka the Fierce seems to have melted away, and a once violent and fiery mind was quenched. In order to cope with his sorrow, Ashoka turned to Buddhism, at this point in world history more of a philosophical sect than anything resembling a religion. Ashoka, inspired primarily by Buddhism and probably by other philosophies floating around India at the time, embraced peace, respect, and spirituality. He essentially became the 3rd century BC version of a hippie. To spread his message, Ashoka issued an order to have enormous stone pillars and slabs dragged across his realm and erected at important locations. Upon these edicts, his words were carved, informing his people of their emperor's change of heart and his desire that they live righteous and good lives. He emphasized non-violence, respect for all religions, and what could be called rights for humans and animals. This was a huge undertaking. Writing was new to India at the time, along with massive stone constructions. These pillars would not only awe citizens, but even needed government officials to be stationed nearby just to read them aloud, making this the first kind of government mass communication in India. And you can feel genuine personality seep from these rocks. For example, Rock Edict 13 contains an actual confession of remorse about what happened at Kalinga. And the text is pretty interesting. It reads like this. Beloved of the gods is deeply pained by the killing, dying and deportation that take place when an unconquered country is conquered. But beloved of the gods is pained even more by this, that Brahmins, ascetics and householders of different religions who live in those countries and who are respectful to superiors, to mother and father, to elders, who behave properly and have strong loyalty towards friends, acquaintances, companions, relatives, servants and employees, they too are injured, killed or separated from their loved ones. Even those who are not affected by all of this suffer when they see friends, acquaintances, companions and relatives affected. These misfortunes befall all as a result of war, and this pains beloved of the gods. And these edicts not only act as a way for Ashoka to confess his sins, but also as a way to spread the philosophy of the emperor's newfound pacifism. War doesn't only affect those that fight, but all members of society. So just after a successful campaign when most rulers would have been planning their next campaign and feasting, Ashoka was instead instituting radical reforms. He would repay his debt to humanity. Hospitals were built across the land. Special botanical gardens were constructed to ensure a steady supply of medicine. Roads were built, wells were dug, and trees were planted to provide shade to weary travellers. Veterinary clinics were established, meat was banned on certain holidays, and the mistreatment of animals now carried a heavy penalty. The Maurya Empire under Ashoka was probably the first to provide animals a guaranteed set of rights, and probably influenced India's special relationship with meat today. Even though he embraced Buddhism, Ashoka did not push it on his people, who mostly followed Brahmanism, which is a kind of proto-Hinduism that was taking shape then. Ashoka instead insisted on tolerance for all religions. Again, here's another quote. Whoever praises his own religion due to excessive devotion and condemns others with the thought, let me glorify my own religion, only harms his own religion. Therefore, contact between religions is good. And a lot of these reforms seem to have been genuine. We don't see any more conflict during Ashoka's reign. While Rome and Carthage were beating each other to bloody pulps in the Mediterranean, Ashoka's empire managed to maintain friendly relations with his fellow Indian kingdoms to the south and the Greeks and Iranians in the west. Under Ashoka's rule, India entered a glittering golden age, his pillars acting as the prime example of this. These pillars were between 15 and 20 meters tall and could weigh up to 50 tons. It's through these pillars that we rediscovered the legacy of Ashoka, who, as a Buddhist emperor in what would become a Hindu land, was mostly forgotten until the British and Indian scholars deciphered the text on the then recently discovered Pillars of Ashoka, transforming Ashoka from a random name in the history of Indian rulers into the truly exceptional figure that we know today. Of all of Ashoka's stone works, the most famous is probably the Lion Capital at Sarnath. Made of perfectly cut sandstone and polished so well that from a distance it appears to be shining metal. It is a fantastic example of architecture that flourished under Ashoka. It even impressed foreign states hundreds of years later and thousands of kilometers away, inspiring replicas as far afield as Wat Umong in Thailand. When India became an independent republic on the 26th of January 1950, it was Ashoka's 4 lions from Sarnath that were chosen as the nation's symbol on that very same day. Ashoka reigned for a peaceful 36 years and died in 232 BC. Had he not left these pillars behind, we may never have known about his spectacular reign, because after his death his empire will crumble in about 50 years and will be overthrown by a non-Buddhist dynasty. Records of his deeds were only maintained by Buddhist monks, who all but disappeared from India in the coming centuries. Now, if Ashoka is so great and his rule so enlightened, why did succeeding rulers not follow in his peaceful footsteps? Why was he all but forgotten? It has been argued by some that his rule may not have been as enlightened or peaceful as we think, and it may all just be ancient propaganda. It should be noted that then, and even today, the Indian subcontinent is a massive hodgepodge of different religions, peoples and ethnicities. The empire that Chandragupta conquered and Ashoka expanded was one of the most diverse in the world. So, was Ashoka just some Machiavellian type character that spotted a practicality in adopting a peaceful facade in order to stitch his new divided realm together? Were his conversion and his pillars just tricks to make people behave? I'm a fan of looking at history sideways and trying to see the other side of common narratives, so let's give it a try. Even though he didn't go to war again during his reign, Ashoka did still maintain an active military, and on one of his edicts even makes a very clear threat towards the forest people living on his borders. He promised that if they did not accept his peace, there would be violence. And while we saw that confession earlier, Ashoka did not give the Kalingans their land back, and the remorseful edicts were placed nowhere near Kalinga. I think it's important to note all these things because Ashoka sometimes gets painted as being flawless. And painting him as flawless doesn't do him justice, because if you read the sources, he comes off as an extreme realist. He saw the carnage at Kalinga and decided to try ruling in another way. Instead of crushing dissent, he would encourage diversity and cooperation. By pushing for respect, tolerance and generosity, he tried to persuade society to function rather than force it to. Which is a very modern way of thinking for a ruler of the ancient world. Most of the sources we have on Ashoka are Buddhist, and he is probably the most important person in Buddhism after the Buddha. The reason for this is because after his conversion, Ashoka dispersed missionaries across Asia, Africa and Europe, spreading the religion out of India and creating a global religion, a legacy that continued long after his pillars had sunk back into the earth. The life of Ashoka and his peaceful aspirations are one of the greatest sources of inspiration for Indians today. His greatness lies not in the fact that he shunned violence after a great victory, but also in how singular an event in world history his change of heart was, and how that should really make us think about the other people we study and respect in world history. Is Ashoka commendable for changing, or is everyone else in world history condemnable for not doing so? These are the kind of fun questions that history throws at us. Because there are thousands of stone columns spread across our world, heralding the likes of the Akkadians or the Romans, crushing so-and-so rebellion or enslaving so-and-so a people. But only Ashoka's pillars stand alone, speaking of kindness. Thank you for watching this series on the Emperor Ashoka. It has been really fun to make, and it's kind of different than what I've usually made, so let me know in the comments down below what you think about this, because I would like to make more biographical videos in the future. As usual, all of my sources are in the description down below. Please read them if you want to know more about Ashoka, because I can't put everything into these short videos. If you want to support the show, there is a Patreon and a t-shirt store in the description below. I appreciate you watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and have a nice day.